stage because you walked up and they went, I'm not going to go back downstairs, I'm just going to stick up here. But this is your regional chair for the South East, and as you're here today, supporting everyone or businesses here in Kent. But I'm going to kind of formally introduce, if that's okay with yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think it's, gives up a lot of time to support the FSB in a voluntary capacity. And I think it's just as fair that you get the time to talk about great stuff and what you do and how you can help people. So our next speaker is an employment law expert, business leader and experienced speaker with more than a decade in business. She is the CEO and founder of Orchard Employment Law, a multi-award-winning consultancy that supports SMEs, large organisations, charities, and public sector clients across the UK. Our speaker is a regular speaker at professional events, conferences, and panels, and she's known for delivering accessible, relevant talks on employment law, workplace culture, leadership, and the realities of running a business. Her expert insights have been featured in Personal Today, the BBC, Sky News, GB News, Times Radio, and the Daily Mail. Please give a very warm welcome to your regional chair and business owner.
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to go through a bit about me bit because you've just heard my wonderful bio. But yes, I can't quite believe I've been in business 11 years. We celebrated last month. And that only seems like 10 years was literally a few months ago. If you would like to connect with me on any of the different platforms, you can. I know it's still got the bird for Twitter. I haven't quite got my head around the X thing yet. And I don't use X that much anyway, but you can connect with me on various forms of social media if you're still interested after the talk. Anyway, I'm going to be talking to you about growing your business because we are talking about not just surviving, which some of you might feel like you're doing, but also thriving. And I was having a conversation earlier with someone and we were talking about different, business models, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a solopreneur. There's nothing wrong with keeping your business small if you want to. There's nothing wrong with working alone. However, in my experience, it's good to have at least somebody else you can call on. And whether that person you call on is an employee, someone you can refer or give your work to, someone or not, to a contractor, I think from my experience, that's quite important because life will life for sure. And there might be a time where you're not feeling well, you've got family commitments or something happens, something more than likely unplanned, and you want to make sure you can still earn at the end of the day. So even though all these things are happening, in terms of rising costs of employment, more legislation, more tax, more, I still think it's a good idea to grow your business. And not just because it benefits me business-wise as well. So it's important to protect your business and to make informed choices. And there are different ways in which you might be running your business. So you might be a sole trader, so that's you working in your own capacity. You might use freelancers and subcontractors. It might be that you are an employer, or it might be that you're planning to grow your business. So wherever you're at, whether you're just starting or you've been in business for 15 to 20 years, I very much hope that there's something you'll take away from this talk today. Now, growth doesn't have to mean employees. Even though I specialise in employment law, there are various different ways to grow your business. And I myself, I have a business that uses a hybrid model. We have employees and we have associates. Some of those people are self-employed, but they very much work under the banner of my business and in the way that I would like them to work when they're working for Orchard Employment Law. And for you, as I say, it might be about referral partnerships. It might be about outsourcing. So perhaps you don't, there's people that we outsource to here today. It might be that you use casual workers or often known as 0 hours workers. So perhaps it might be that you can't afford or you don't want to commit to paying somebody X amount of hours per week or per month. A 0 hours work is an option. Or it might be that you're using other freelancers. There's no right model for you or for all businesses, but there might be a right model for you. And that indeed might even change. Now, to start off with, I want to tell you what the differences are between worker status. And worker status is a very employment law or tax term. And quite often I get people say to me, well, my accountant said this person is self-employed. And accountants in the room love you dearly. However, you do accountancy and I'll do employment law. And sometimes for some reason, interchangeable terms for tax and employment law don't marry. Sometimes they mean different things. An example being many years ago, I remember someone saying to me, as long as a person works for 2 other people, they're definitely not employed. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that works in accountancy, but that isn't the rule for employment law. So I'm going to talk you through what the different things are. You'll see that I've got a lovely table. I heard that AI likes tables. I've been listening to the talk. I've got a lovely table. An employee works under a contract of employment. They work under a contract of employment whether or not you provide one, by the way. You'd be surprised the amount of times I have new clients and they'll say, no, I never gave them a contract. Yeah, a contract exists whether or not you write one down. It's better that you determine the contract rather than the contract determining itself. They have most statutory rights, or all statutory rights to be fair. You get greater employer control. So why would I want to be an employer? It's because I can say things like, well, I want you to work for me this time to this time. I want you to work in this way. I want you not to be able to steal my clients. I want you not to be able to steal my staff. There are controls that I might have or I'm able to have as an employer. However, on the flip side, I have lots of obligations to my employees too. So it's not a one-way street. An employer usually has notice periods. And notice period, by the way, can be quite short. So the statutory notice period, the legal notice period minimum, is 1 week per full year worked, up to a maximum of 12 weeks. So if someone has worked for you for 20 years, the maximum notice period they would have is 12 weeks. And that is irrespective of what your contract says. So if you put a contract in place and you say, yeah, but I only agree to give them 1 month's notice if they have worked for you for 5 years. Honey, let me hold your hand while I tell you this. It is 5 weeks notice, okay? You don't get to determine outside of what the law says. And they'll have unfair dismissal rights. We'll talk about those later. Subject to qualifying rules. Now, a worker is neither employed and neither self-employed. And this is where sometimes people start business relationships and end up unknowingly in this position. So they think, I don't have any employees. Everyone that works with me is self-employed. But a worker is someone who is giving personal service. So they're not working under a company. They're giving service personally, so only they give that service. And they have some statutory rights, a bit like it is a 0 hours contract worker in effect. They can work more flexibly, might work more flexibly, but they're still entitled to holiday pay and they're still entitled to national minimum wage. This is the bit that people tend to get confused about. And a self-employed person, most of us know that. They normally run their own business. You'd expect them to either have a company or a unique tax reference number. They should have no employment rights. They have genuine independence. And you don't get to determine who does the work when. And an example I give is if my boiler breaks, I use this because, do you remember when we had the big freeze so many years ago? I live out in the middle of nowhere. And when we had the big freeze, everybody's boiler on the estate I live in broke at the same time. And also it was a new build. So that was the reason why. And I called British Gas, and British Gas would say to me, I'm sending Ben. And so I would expect Ben to turn up. It's sort of Ben turning up, Sally would turn up. I don't care as long as my boiler gets fixed. However, if Natalie, who is holding the camera, one of my employees, said, I'm not coming in today, Jemma, but don't worry, I'm sending Jane, I think we'd have a few words. Okay, so that's to give you an example. Someone who's self-employed is responsible for their own tax. They should be providing you with invoices. They should be responsible for their own tax, and they can substitute themselves for others, usually quite often. So you want to have an agreement in place for either one of these statuses. Doesn't matter if the person's self-employed. Ask them to give you an agreement. Decide whether or not it's something you want to sign. You can negotiate sometimes. And the same with a worker. Make sure you've got an agreement in place, and the same with employees. So why does it matter? Mostly it's because there are things, and then And before I go to the big one, sensitive much. If you've got employees or workers, you do need to pay holiday pay. Now, I remember when I started out many years ago, and probably up until about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, people would be like, they're on a 0-hours contract, so you're not entitled to holiday pay. Not true. You're entitled to holiday pay, even if someone is on a 0-hours contract. You want to make sure you're not falling foul of these things. You want to make sure that you're paying the right taxes. You might be liable to pay some contributions to pensions, and it's all good news, isn't it? But also you want to think about your reputation. You don't want to be known as that company that exploits people, or that business that exploits people, or that person that exploits people. So you want to make sure you're getting it right. And you certainly don't want any tribunal claims, although if you do get them, I know a good lady who can help you with those. So the reality of this is really that relationships matter even more than the label, and particularly in small businesses where reputation, quite frankly, is everything, right? So here's some good agreements to make. Good agreements make good relationships. And when we think about agreements and we think about contracts that we should have in place, I want to think about some of the people that you might not have thought of. So yes, employees quite obviously should have a contract. But what about your customers? Do you have business terms and conditions? By the way, this is not something I personally can help you with, or our business can help you with. But you should have something in place with your customers and your clients. You should have something in place with your referral partners. I had a conversation with somebody earlier, and I was saying, okay, so if you're going to give somebody, I don't know, 5% for every referral that you give to them, is that 5% of the first invoice, or is that 5% of if they pay you every month for the next 12 months? Is that 5% if they come back to you them again in 6 months' time? Is it 5% gross? Is it 5% once they've been paid? Is it 5% even if you're thinking about commission agreements for your employees? If you're giving, say 5% on a commission, is it 5% forever? Or is it 5% as long as they're still an employee with you? So you see, there's lots to think about with these agreements. And I always say, if you've got clarity, it prevents conflict. Oops. And most disputes start small. Everyone thinks everyone's okay. Everybody's in love until they're not. Okay. And most relationships are better when you put something in place before the fallout happens. And most things can be prevented if you have conversations early. So whether you're working with anybody in whatever capacity, whether that's in an employment sense, or whether that is in a client sense, make sure you set out what it is that you're wanting to achieve. Make sure you keep notes and you confirm decisions in writing. Sometimes when I say about keeping notes, you might think, well, I'm just having a little off the cuff conversation saying, how are you today with this employee? And then, 6 months down the line, they say, you never offered me any support with that thing. And you asked them how they were every week, but you've got no record of that. Right, I'm going to skip ahead a bit. Whoops. So here are some things that I think you need to think about before you bring someone into your businesses. Firstly, do I actually need the help? Do you? Maybe you don't. Maybe you do. And what is the right relationship model? And have you documented that relationship model properly? I don't mean just use AI. So I'm not saying that AI is bad. Sometimes it's a good starting point, but rubbish in, rubbish out. If you don't know what you're asking for, then you don't know there's things that you need. What's happened quite recently is with some of our clients, they've been having to make cuts and cut down on their business. They don't want to do redundancy. There's a thing you can do called a layoff or short time working. So where they could offer some work on shorter hours, but they didn't put the short time working clause in the contract, and now they can't rely on it. So get somebody to have a proper look at it. It doesn't have to be me, but get someone to have a proper look at it. And would my business be protected if it ended tomorrow? If you're working in your personal capacity, if you're not a limited company, what would be the protection if it ended tomorrow? Now, there's another bit that can't go backwards, sorry, that I've missed out on. I do want to talk to you quickly about some of the changes that have happened recently in employment law. Now, firstly, there's a duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. And sexual harassment, by the way, when we think of that, everyone thinks they know what that is, but it's not the obvious things all the time. Sometimes it's the little things, it's the comments. There's a case where a lady didn't have a lock on the door and she was breastfeeding and she asked for a lock on the door. That was considered sexual harassment. There was a case where a man was called Baldy and that was considered sexual harassment. So I'm going to say to you, if you don't know what sexual harassment is, do some research. You've got that duty to prevent sexual harassment. And what's coming in more is a duty to protect your staff members against third-party harassment, and not just sexual harassment, also racial harassment and other harassment as well. Harassment is any unwanted attention from one person to another. We've got a flexible working request that came in from day one. So someone doesn't have to work for you for months and months and months before they say, can I work part-time flexibly? And you can still say no, by the way. Sometimes the media will have you believe that you can't say no. Yes, you can. You can say no if you have a good reason. Carers leave is coming in, paternity leave as well. It came in from day one. Paternity leave comes in from day one, but you're not entitled to paternity pay from day one yet. That's something I think, again, is a bit misconstrued in the media. We've got data protection obligations. I haven't got a beat on the dates, either today or tomorrow, but there are more. The GDPR landscape has changed yet again. Either today or tomorrow. I haven't figured out what date it is. It's the 19th, I think that's tomorrow. And so you might find yourself getting requests about data that you're not really recognising as data requests. It seems as though the ICO, the people that are governing the people that they could go and complain to, want you to deal with the complaints first and properly. So have a look into that as well. And sick pay from day one. And then the biggest thing, I guess, is everyone saying, oh, everyone's got employment rights from day one. It's not from day one anymore. It's not from day one. From January, any employee who has 6 months service as of 1st of January will have the right to bring a claim for unfair dismissal. Now, I know that sounds like I'm ending on a really bad note. I promise I'm not. I employ people, I know all of the problems and I still do it, which means that it can't be that bad. What I would say is take advice. You know, there's lots of free advice available out there, whether it's through organisations like FSB, whether you have a look online, whether you have a website, definitely sign up to our newsletter. But also do, you know, if you want more information, then speak to somebody who can help. And thank you very much.
I think it's easier to put man on the moon. I mean, it's super complex, isn't it? And that's why you need someone like yourself, Jemma, to be able to handhold, talk about through the circumstances, answer the questions, give the right advice, which I think is crucial here, isn't it?
Absolutely. So employment law and tax laws are the fastest changing laws in the UK. And at the moment, with that Employment Rights Act, it's the biggest shift in 30 years. So it's difficult to keep, I honestly understand it's difficult to keep up, but it is important to keep up.
How many of you have got employees? Have got people working with you, for you? Quite a few of you. You're not going to go away and sack them all tomorrow, are you? Because you'll get yourself into all sorts of hot water anyway. But if you do need any advice or guidance, this is your lady. So please give her a big round of applause once again. Thank you very much.